A particular note that I have concern about is not the perception that feminism is good or bad. What I have a problem with is that the third generational wave of feminism is something I very much am opposed to in many ways. The first wave of women's suffrage, for example, I think was very beneficial, brought many things forward. The second wave of feminism, the one that we recognize from the 1960s, in many ways has vastly changed our world for the better. The notion that you could actually take a job because you would enjoy it, you find it fulfilling, has actually enabled not only women to succeed, but for men to be able to choose a course other than the one that they typically would be assigned by a gender role. I think that's been a very beneficial positive step forward. I would also sit down and say that there have been some negatives that have fallen out of it. Hookup culture is one of them. The whole notion of the catharsis to this is the pickup culture, is spawning off directly because of the relation with the second wave of feminism. Third wave of feminism is more about supplicating men's desires to the feminine nature. And it is something that is no longer about just equal rights and equal status. It is about superiority, and it's being pushed. And I find a number of issues along those lines to be terribly unhealthy for not only an individual, but for society as a whole. I mentioned earlier this idea of third wave of feminism, and when we look at it, feminism isn't just one continuous idea and notion being brought forward through society. There have been three typically distinct and separable ideas and timeframes in which they have existed. The first phase was simply women's suffrage, when women literally were trying to actively get the same rights as citizens, period. And it's something that we typically take for face value, so we don't even recognize it today. Then the second wave typically occurred during the early 60s, transformed through the 70s, in which we actually start to see equal rights, equal pay for equal work, so forth. And that is, again, something that had brought massive changes within our society, both pro and con. The third wave is something very distinct. It's coming from multiple different directions and really typically has been taking a typical form, but it's generated by the phrase, for example, girl power or female empowerment. But it's not just empowering women, it's empowering women beyond gender equality. It's now about supplanting male supremacy. It's about rectifying past wrongs through further wrongs. And what we have is a complete alienation of men, the complete alienation of masculinity within relationship structures. It's not enough that men are just disposable at this point. We're actually at a point in time in which men aren't even necessary. We're at a point in which science can actually create out of a stem cell sperm. A man's not even needed, even for the act of procreation and sperm generation. You no longer even have to be the sperm donor. Sperm can be created, and thus men are completely irrelevant from the equation. Unfortunately, feminism and girl power hasn't been able to, they've gotten what they've wanted, and they've created a world in which I think that they've gone very much astray, and it still hasn't answered the real question of being able to have the types of men, the types of relationships that they clearly, honestly want. And feminism isn't answering it. It's leading many women astray. It's leading men astray. And we're seeing it in rising and rising divorce rates and the catastrophic results that we see across our nation. On a very basic level, when you sit down and say, as your child develops, when they don't have a two-parent household or family, nuclear family, you don't have the role models from the very beginning that relationships are stable and they will last, because your reality is they don't. And that starts to play off. You also have this father avoidance element, that men they're simply not needed. They're inconsequential. And I think there are immense dangers in society when we tell one gender, you're inconsequential.